Let's try to start with a definition. Problematic there is the use of the word traditional followed by musical theatre in the singular, implying that there is one all-encompassing artistic tradition of that kind. In fact, inasmuch as stage works are accompanied or interwoven with music, and even confining ourselves purely to the Occident, there are a myriad of competing musical so-called traditions. The tradition to which the Majora team adheres is properly termed the Western operatic tradition. What is usually meant by musical theatre, by contrast, is something closer to music hall or Broadway theatre, which is a very different set of aesthetic goals despite considerable overlap. So, to answer this question meaningfully, I would need to confine it to some aesthetic context, and the most logical place to do that would be, given our own context, the Western operatic tradition. My aesthetic upbringing is fairly Wagnerian, and I'm particularly enamoured with his reasonably faithful representation of natural conversation within a musical context. The typically done thing hitherto would be to structure an opera as an alternation of aria and recitative, that is, structured musical prosody and a comparatively less regimented adoption of the rhythms of ordinary speech, respectively. Wagner most of the time does something that is not quite either, too structured for recitative, but not quite an aria. This lends it an authenticity unencumbered by the strictures of a repetitive musical form without having to undermine the musical structure surrounding it. I find this marriage of music and prose-like poetry mutually amicable to both and therefore agreeable to the audience. Wagnerian orchestration, too, has an organicity that has been likened at times to a soup, but to me, it's a soup that rises up and swallows you whole. Certainly you'll drown, but what a drowning indeed.
My background is Italian and French opera, where the singers usually lead and the orchestra accompanies. However, I am very fond of Berlioz and the way he interweaves singers and orchestra in the dialogue. There's a sort of back and forth in which the singers are neither lost in the middle of orchestra like in Wagner, nor do they rule supreme like in Italian opera. They're sort of enhanced by it in a way that goes beyond the basic structure of melody and chords.
I'm a big fan of early 20th century music, so composers like Debussy, Stravinsky, Schoenberg and Alban are a big reference for what I do. Berg's Lulu stands as one of my favorite operas. The darkness and drama of it attracts me, and I find that the sense of drama mixed with the harmonic freedom of early 20th century is what draws me the most to the music of that period. Puccini has also deeply impacted the way I think about and listen to music. I also like very much some of the most cherished operas of the late Romantics, like Bizet's Carmen, Verdi's Rigoletto, and Wagner's Ring, and I have a soft spot for the bel canto of Bellini, Donizetti, Rossini, and the rest of the gang. Also essential for me is the music of American composer John Adams. His opera Nixon in China is just amazing.
It's a bit too early for specifics of that sort. Set management depends on a lot of factors, relying heavily on the opera company staging the work and the limitations of the space. A lot of modern productions rely on either fixed or insubstantial abstract sets. Because Majora breaks the rule of a single set per act, it might be tempting to rely on insubstantiality, but the very nature of the work relies on bringing the setting to palpable life. That said, complex physical sets have become a bit of a boogeyman for any company that isn't at the very top. To solve that, the staging reference tome to be compiled will include a system currently being devised which demonstrates how a single fixed set piece and very few moving ones can provide for the entire work with little effort. It's definitely an element I take very seriously, given the subject of the work and its visual symbolism. There is a difference between things that originate from Link and things that are the consequence of Link's actions. It was mentioned previously that the Legend of Zelda theme would be absent on the account of being Link's leitmotif, and so would ocarinas due to their exclusivity to Link. In the particular case of the Clock Town demo, the Rosa Sisters' choreography was used to make it clear to those who know the game who those shadows belong to. In the context of the opera, that choreography could be anything, because it doesn't contribute in any way to the plot. Now, the Rosa Sisters are a part of the work, and they will be dancing. I would then ask, would you rather see a recognizable element being represented, or something completely different? Either way, their stage choreography would not be limited to the meager number of moves that they make in the game. It would undergo a considerable amount of development by an actual choreographer, which is why I think leaving the familiar basic moves there could lead to an interesting result. You must remember that this is an adaptation, so if you're going to be especially picky about every single detail, you might come out of it disappointed. That said, I do not make any decision about Majora without giving it due consideration. The music that originates from that jam session is part of the score. It is, however, heavily altered in style because of the context in which it appears in the opera. In fact, I think there's an instrumental draft of it playing in the background of one of the Q&As. Now, the fact that the Indigogos actually played a song in the game is inseparable from Link's interference. The thing is, unlike the previous case with the Rosa Sisters, there is no diegetic depiction of it in the opera. Meaning, it is music that plays in the opera, but it is not being performed by a character. For example, Guru Guru does indeed play the Song of Storms on his hurdy-gurdy in the opera, but the use of the Song of Storms by the orchestra and singers later on is non-diegetic, meaning it's out of the universe. Much like a character in a book is not actually being written about in their own universe, a character in an opera is not actually singing. The singer is. We might have to ask Dr. Schrödinger.